Time to have a look at the markets. Major Asian markets were mixed, with oil prices continuing to rise. Meanwhile, China released its data on manufacturing activity in the morning. Mainland Chinese stocks rose by the afternoon. However, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was subdued, edging down 0.4% in the afternoon. Japan's Nikkei closing just below the flat line. When we look at the European stocks, they pulled back as the pandemic and inflation concerns lingered, but was still on course for a strong first half of the year. U.S. stock futures slightly lower as the market gets set to close out a winning first half of 2021 and a second quarter. But to talk about all of these things, some of the local stuff happening over the past week or so, we are joined by David Shapiro, who is from SASFin. David, thank you so much for your time. What do you make of the trading day so far?
Tash, it's been very quiet, and it's unusual because it's the end of the half year. I'm expecting more activity as we get to the close, because generally at half year end, either people close positions or try to prop up their positions. It's just a movement that we often see. So I think waiting this afternoon, we will see a little more activity. But at the moment, it remains trading remains very subdued. No real features to talk about, which you haven't pointed out already in your introduction.
Right. So, I mean, when you look at what's happening with the spread of the Delta variant, even though vaccination rates are increasing, how cautious are you, as a trader, as an investor?
Well, it's a worry. And I think that we were perhaps a little complacent, as we've seen in Australia. They opened up fully and felt that they'd got on top of the virus, and now everybody's rushing to have a vaccination. And I think the same is going to apply until we really get a full rollout around the world in most of the countries, most of major countries. In fact, I don't want to say major countries, every country, there's still going to be concerns that this will, it will throw any kind of economic recovery off the rails. So it can be a worry. America's doing fine. Europe and seems to be fine. It's just patchy areas around there that is a worry. But overall, I think economies are still pointing upwards, and I think markets are still heading higher. It hasn't had too much effect yet, or major effect yet.
Right. So let's look at the local markets. I mean, we started the week with everybody talking about the leisure-related stocks that took a bit of a beating. Maybe I'm being too harsh with my word by saying beating, but as a result of the level 4 lockdown. From your assessment right now, how are they performing, the likes of Tsogosan, Sun International?
No, it's harsh. I think we thought we were getting through it until we hit, the third wave hit. No one's going to come here, and that's the big issue. Even traveling abroad is very onerous if you want to go abroad, particularly that we're linked with, India, Mexico, Brazil, and South Africa. We're red areas. So I don't think people will come here because of that. So, it's really sad because companies like City Lodge, like Sun International, like Tsogo are going to be hurt, and particularly the casinos. So it's a bit premature to get into those sides. And from an economic point of view, it's going to hang heavy. There's nothing we can do about it, and nor do I think there's any relief. So we just have to get through it, right, and hopefully wait for summer.
I mean, when you assess the local markets, is there one thing about JSE stocks that they've got going for them versus the emerging market stocks?
I still tend to point towards mining and engineering. I think those are areas that are going to kind of underpin this market. If we look at the top end of the market, and I'm talking about some of the big caps, they're doing okay. If you look at Naspers and you look at Process, of course, that's going to be dictated what's happening to Tencent. But if we start to look at some of the mining counters, there's still a number of areas that one can look at: the Invictus, the Hudecos, the Robexes, businesses like that, Barlow Rand, I think that have got some kind of exposure to mining will do okay. I still think Omnia has a chance, exposed to agriculture and exposed to explosives, which miners use. So if you start to pinpoint, you've got to be very selective. I think, looking at an index is not going to be that easy. So you've got to choose individual stocks.
Right, so let's move things stateside. On Friday, we're expecting U.S. non-farm payrolls data. How important is that report?
Well, it's very important for those who are unemployed, and I think the fact that they're coming back to the market, they're expecting 700,000, which is a very good number. It all depends on how the market interprets it. If it's a heavy number and employment is now starting to or unemployment is now starting to decrease dramatically, then one's going to start building in that interest rates will rise sooner than expected and so on. So here we get this debate that goes on all the time. So sometimes it's very difficult to understand how the markets will interpret the data. But I think despite that, the Fed's view is that they want to get to a point where everybody who lost their job because of the pandemic gets it back. And I think they will continue to fashion their strategy around that, regardless of what commentators say.
Well, we're on that key piece of event or information that you're keeping an eye on.
Sorry, did you say what event?
Yes. So what will you be looking at? What event will you be keeping an eye on?
You know what? Everything. It can't be just one thing. I mean, the amount of data, the numbers that we have to go through on a day-to-day basis and try to work your way through, it's very difficult to really single out one. But the jobs is very important. Employment for the American economy is still the paramount number that they're going to look at. And as I repeat, they won't, the Fed will not rest until they've got back to that level. Then we can start worrying about other things such as inflation and so on. So I think that's the most important subject at the moment.
All right, David, thank you so much for your time. That is David Shapiro from Sasfin. Looking at other news now, the city of Tshwane has lashed out at the latest decision by ratings agency Moody's to downgrade the metro deeper into junk status with a review for a further downgrade. Moody's lowered the city's rating to C AA.